Sound of Freedom is a new action-ish, it's more of a crime thriller movie that tells the story behind Tim Ballard, played by Jim Caviezel. As I mentioned, this movie is based off the shockingly true story behind Tim Ballard and what sort of work that he did and what he was able to accomplish. In this movie, initially you discover that Tim Ballard was just working for Homeland Security. He and his team were responsible for cracking down and capturing among worldwide sex predators and child molesters and pedophiles. One day though, he's actually able to rescue one of these kids, this 8-year-old boy who was used in child sex trafficking. He's able to rescue him, bring him home to his father. And once he does that, he gains this urge to go out there and save countless other children who are also being forced into child sex slavery, which leads to this big sting operation that he and a couple other people are planning, which will hopefully take down a bunch of people trying to sell these kids and will rescue many of these children, among whom this young boy's sister, who is also sold into sex slavery. Apparently the story behind Sound of Freedom is this movie was apparently made like 5 years ago, and it was originally going to be distributed under Fox, but then Fox had its rights purchased by Disney, and when Disney bought the rights to Fox, they opted not to pick up the distribution rights for Sound of Freedom. So with that, Sound of Freedom just kind of got cast aside as a movie. It went through, I guess, kind of just kind of got left there on the shelf, like no one was picking up. They were trying to find companies that would. Eventually they stumbled upon this small independent company known as Angel Studios. They picked it up, they distributed it, and ironically, this is a movie that many people haven't even heard of. I mean, the media hasn't talked about it. I never saw a trailer for this movie at any of the movies that I go and see. I mean, I heard about this movie through basic word of mouth, other YouTube movie reviewers, some people on Twitter. That's how I found out about it. And having seen Sound of Freedom, oh boy, I don't know where to begin. This is without question one of the heaviest and most powerful movies I have seen in such a long time. It is, wow. I guess I should start with the subject matter of this movie. Okay, the subject matter this movie touches on is admittedly a very dark and very touching subject that's going to just hit a lot of people. I mean, it's a movie that touches on human trafficking, and not just human trafficking, but human trafficking in children, like these young kids who get taken from their families and are just sold into doing sex slavery to make money for these scumbag criminals who have abducted them. I obviously was aware that human trafficking was a thing in this world, but I had no idea just how much of it revolved around kids. And the reality is, I don't think there are many people in this world who were aware of that, and that's why I think this is the type of movie that everyone should experience, so the message can be sent across. And there's like a montage in like the beginning of the movie and kind of like the opening credits where you see like live security camera footage of people just coming out onto the streets, taking kids off the streets and loading them into vans and motorcycles and just driving away for their family and friends to really just never see them again and just do what they intend to do with them. It is some really horrible, just heartbreaking shit, and it absolutely blows your mind that it's a thing that happens today. So as a result of that, it immediately gets you interested in Tim Ballard's story and what he did for these kids, or at least tried to do for these kids. And I think that's played so well by Jim Caviezel. And Jim Caviezel hasn't been in a whole lot. I mean, his biggest project he's known for is Passion of the Christ, where he played Jesus. This is probably the first movie that I can think of since then, or at least that I can recall since then, that he's been in. And he does a really good job here. What I really love about his portrayal of Tim Ballard is he really represents what a guy like Tim Ballard probably went through. I mean, he had a really tough job in the beginning. He was cracking down on people who were obtaining and distributing child pornography. So you can imagine this guy saw and witnessed some really awful shit that just can break you as a human being. And Jim Caviezel just does a great job with that. I mean, you can just see in his eyes, you can see sadness, you can see pain, you can see distraught, but at the same time you can also see a level of determination in him. I mean, you can see a level of just, you're so emotionally impacted by what happened, but you're not just gonna sit there, go home and cry about it. You're like, I have to do something here. Like, what is going on is terrible, and this needs to be stopped. As the movie goes on, that's what I appreciate seeing. This movie is obviously based off a true story, off in Operation, I can't remember the name of it, that did result in the rescuing of many kids from this dark, terrible thing that is, human trafficking. And it's very interesting seeing exactly how Tim Ballard was able to pull this off, the people he met with, the people he was able to get to help orchestrate this thing, and it was very interesting just how they were able to do it. Gives you a little bit more of an appreciation for the work that people in these crime operations put in to crack down on these big criminal industries that they're trying to take down. Also, yeah, this goes without saying, this movie emotionally just absolutely wipes you out. I mean, some of that credit goes to Jim Caviezel and just what he's able to do as an actor, but I gotta give a lot of credit to the kid actors that are in this movie because, oh man, I can only imagine how hard it was for them. I mean, they're playing these victims of this horrible tragedy that you wouldn't want to wish upon anybody in this world, the least of all these young children. You see sadness in their eyes, you hear pain in their voice, you see brokenness in these kids. There is one moment, Jim Caviezel is just having a conversation with one of these kids, and they're just kind of talking about like what the kid went through, how long this kid's been going through it, and the kid mentions exactly how long it's been or how the kid knows how long it's been. And I just felt an absolute crack in my chest from just pure heartbreak just hearing that, because that conversation was probably real, and it's true. It's what happens. But to give the movie a lot of credit, it was able to walk that line to the point where it wasn't being overly graphic with its messaging. I mean, you obviously know what happens with these kids. We're all aware of it when you watch the movie. But the movie is PG-13, so they can't be completely in your face with it, and that's a good thing. Because there's no doubt, if they wanted to be like completely in your face and just show the total evil and just horrible things behind it, no one would have the stomach to sit through it. I mean, it's hard enough to stomach the subject matter, but at that point, nobody would be a part of it. I mean, when you show really dark subject matter with kids, it can hit everybody a much different way than it would with, like, adults. I mean, I remember seeing Dr. Sleep a few years back, and that scene with Jacob Tremblay, I mean, it caused some people in my eyes to just walk out and just leave the movie. So I give Sound of Freedom a lot of credit in the fact that it knew that it had to convey its subject matter across to everybody, but it knew not to cross a line either. As I mentioned earlier, the media hasn't really given a lot of endorsement to this movie. In fact, some people out there have tried to say that this movie is very alt-right, it's very, it leans that way. I mean, it's released under a faith-based studio, so is it going to be very preachy or very overly religious? Is it just going to try to waterboard you and like Christian messaging or something like that? I'm going to tell you right now, the movie is nothing like that. I don't think this movie is at all overly religious or preachy. I mean, you hear God 3 times in this whole movie, and one of them is the iconic line that you see in the trailer when Jim Caviezel or Tim Ballard said, God's children are not for sale. And I mean, you hear that line, you don't really take that as religion, you take that as, yeah, everyone I think can agree on that. Children in this world should not be sent into slavery. And even as far as the political side of it, I thought this movie was very apolitical. I mean, this movie isn't about, conservatives versus liberal versus moderation or anything like that. I mean, it's a movie about rescuing kids. Like, I really don't know how anyone would try to find something political in that and why they would discourage people from seeing a movie like this. Like, it's really difficult subject matter, I get it, and it makes me feel emotional. I was welling up in tears many times for this movie. I mean, I didn't cry full on, but there were moments I could have. And yeah, it's really tough to watch. It hits you in a very strong way, but just because it's maybe an uncomfortable movie to watch doesn't mean it's not a movie that's worth watching. And I'm also going to say this, one thing that I'm really impressed by with this movie, and I will say with just all the moviegoers out there, is how well this movie has been killing it at the box office. I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like Hollywood's been trying to seal this movie off for people not to see it, and, in some ways, like, they're trying to keep people from seeing it or whatever it is, because, I don't know, it doesn't fit Hollywood's agenda. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I kind of hope I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of the way I see it. And yet, through word of mouth, Sound of Freedom is doing amazing for itself at the box office. I think during the Barbenheimer weekend, actually, behind only Barbie and Oppenheimer, Sound of Freedom was third at the box office. That's ahead of movies like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. That's ahead of movies like Indiana Jones. Like, that's pretty remarkable. I think, like, the movie had, like, a $14 million budget. It doesn't feel like that. I mean, it felt like it had more than that. I mean, the fact that it did what it did with $14 million, I think, is remarkable. But beyond that, the movie's gross, I think, like $150 million at the box office. So it has turned a serious profit for itself. And because of that, it kind of now gives me hope that this very independent studio that is Angel Film Studios will now have the ability to release more of its projects at maybe a wider release. I mean, not gonna lie, me and my friend, when we saw this movie, there were trailers for other movies coming out that are gonna be distributed by Angel Studios, and the trailers, they looked interesting. I was talking about this movie with someone, and this person told me that it sounds like, in a way, if Sound of Freedom is the massive success that it's going to be, at least for itself, that means that Angel Film Studios could, in a way, become the new A24. This sort of independent film company that's not really tied to any agenda on its side, just does what it feels it wants to do with movies, but it's successful because of it, so movies like that are made. I'm hoping that with the success of a movie like this studio could do the same thing, especially given the fact that Sound of Freedom basically decided to go up against Hollywood and is beating it at its own game. However, this being a review, I will say right now, Sound of Freedom is absolutely not a perfect movie. For starters, the movie is marketed as sort of an action movie. It's not an action movie. This is not Liam Neeson in Taken or anything like that. Like, this guy who was a total, like, absolute badass, at least in that sense. He's going out and he's beating all these guys' asses and he's rescuing all these kids. It's not really like that. In fact, there's like one fight scene in the whole movie, and the fight scene itself, you don't really see it. It kind of like shifts in and out of blackness, so you can't really see entirely what's going on. I mean, I think the movie wanted to try to do that to make it feel more real. Well, not really real, but maybe like seeing from the perspective of who saw what was going on, I guess. But the point is, right there, I don't know if you could really call the movie an action scene. Like I said, a crime thriller, absolutely, but action, no. Also, I'll say this much, there are moments with this movie that definitely drag on quite a bit. I mean, there's a moment where you feel like, you know, everything that's needed to be done has been done, but then the movie kind of keeps going, and I understood why it kept going. There were still pieces of the story that needed to be told, but the pieces of the story that we get here kind of feel a little bit disconnected from what had been the big gist of the story earlier. I will say this though, I did really like how the movie wrapped up, how, you know, it kind of does the whole, like, you know, the movie starts this way, and then it ends this way, and it kind of feels like it's all come together in that sense. I appreciated that. But also I have to talk about what is, you know, my favorite thing to talk about with movies, and that is replay value. Could I see myself watching Sound of Freedom again? My answer is probably not. I mean, for one, yeah, it's an extremely heavy subject matter. It's the kind that I just don't know if I can sit through and watch again because of how much of a toll it took on me. But having said that, when you compare it to like other movies that are like that, like, I don't know, like Schindler's List or 12 Years a Slave, those movies are really hard to watch, but they have such incredible performances and direction and scripts and like set design or whatever you want to call it. I mean, those movies were up for a bunch of awards, and rightfully so. It's kind of like reasons like that that make you go back and watch those movies again from time to time. Sound of Freedom, as well done of a movie as it is, and as glad as I am that I saw it, it doesn't have anything quite at the level that would make me come back to it again. It's that type of movie that just stabs you right in the gut and you just go down. You're just like, I can't go through that again, but I'm glad I saw it. So all in all, Sound of Freedom, it's such a powerful film. Jim Caviezel was great in the role as Tim Ballard. I was really appreciative that we got to learn about this story that many of us didn't know about. The kid actors do a great job. I have no idea how they were able to get through being part of such a heavy movie, but props to them for being able to do it. It's a truly remarkable story about rescue and hope and freedom. There's not really any action in the movie. The movie may feel a little uneven at times, and it's not a movie that I can see myself watching again. But in the end, this was not a movie that was meant to necessarily be entertaining. It was a movie that was meant to be informative. And it was exactly that. The fact that you walk away with such an understanding of what is a really dark time that we are still dealing with in this world, you walk out of the movie feeling very enlightened and, in a way, also appreciative that heroes like Tim Ballard exist in this world to try to bring this horrible thing that's going on in this world down. And that's what you walk away from this movie feeling. At least that's what I did anyway. And yeah, I really hope we as an audience continue to support this movie and continue to help it make the money that it's trying to make and help spread the word that it's trying to spread. And with that, this studio will probably be able to bring us more movies that maybe aren't as heavy, but perhaps just as good, if not even better. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video, and as always, don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.